Now, Sean Kennedy, if you don't know who he is, he's a Blender compositing artist, and he's worked in VisualFX for a very long time. And he recorded this awesome video for us. So without further ado, we're going to switch over to Sean Kennedy.
Hey everybody, it's Sean Kennedy, and I wasn't sure if I'd be able to present live or not, so I did a little pre-recorded video, and that's what this is. And I just wanted to show off a few compositing things. I'd like to show off some of the new things that Sergey has put in since I was at the Blender Institute in October. He's had a lot of cool new features, so I thought I'd go over just a couple of them. A lot of them are pretty minor, but I can show them too, actually. So
if you can't hear anything.
So yeah, let's get into it. First thing to do is let's switch over to motion tracking and bring in some footage. I'm going to move pretty quickly just because I want to show you a couple of these new features and then show you a node that I made that's very helpful. Let's see, what do I want to bring in? Let's do power plant footage, that stuff. So this is a tripod shot of a power plant very near to my home. Set scene frames, prefetch. did anybody it's gone, but there's a I'm using one of the latest builds, and this taskbar, this progress bar thing that pops up is much bigger now. It's much nicer. So anyway, here's the footage, just a tripod shot, but it's perfect for this technique that I want to show, for stabilizing and then unstabilizing, which is a very common technique in compositing when you've got a tripod shot. In a tripod shot, if I let this play, there's no perspective change between foreground things and background things. And that perspective change is what allows a camera to do a match move shot. It allows you to derive that three-dimensional information because of that perspective change. If it's on a tripod, there is no perspective change, so you don't need a full match move. You just got to track it, and everything will just drop in. And if you're doing like a rotoscope, or if you're adding something into the scene, if we wanted to paint stuff up here or whatever we wanted to do, anything we wanted to do, we would have to apply the track data to it. We would have to, use, in Blender we would use a transform node and the track position node and all that. And if we were going to rotoscope anything, you'd have to parent the roto to the track itself. You're moving that data around a lot. Whereas if you can stabilize the footage and then unstabilize it at the end, when you stabilize the footage, you can then work on it however you want. You can, because it kind of stays put. It doesn't move. I'll show you here. And then at the end, you just reintroduce that motion. So let's go ahead and do it. I'm going to just track a point right here in the middle. Should track pretty easily. Track forward. And that one track is all we will need. I hit L. Make sure it's locked on. Looks good. L again. F. And that's it. That's all we need to do for that. So let's go ahead over to compositing. Take a look over here. Don't need that. Do need that. I don't really need that, but I'll leave it in here. Definitely don't need that. Bring in a movie clip. Like I said, I'm going to move pretty quickly because I want to make sure I can get to everything that I want to show you. This is my standard, kind of how I set up all my standard comp stuff when I'm comping. Already right off the bat, you will notice that this is new, and that maybe I'm the only one in the world that noticed this, but there now are red, green, and blue channel buttons, which when you're compositing, that's a necessary thing, is to be able to look at the color channels when you're doing high-end compositing kind of stuff. And you may want to use the channel information to create mats or color things. There's a million ways to use the channels, and so seeing them is very important. So we used to only have them when you would turn on backdrop. They would only be there, and for some reason they were never in the UV image viewer, but they've been added, so that's great. That's one of those minor things. So alright, so let's get to work. We've got our footage. Looks great, right? Just moves exactly the same. So let's bring in that stabilize node, which is under distort, stabilize 2D, drop it there, pick our footage, and the footage should now be stabilized. Which does it? Oh, you know what I forgot to do? Duh. We got to add that marker to the 2D stabilization. Just add it in there. Now we should be good to go. What was I thinking? Sheesh. There we go. So another interesting thing, Blender used to leave these big black gaps on the side. I wonder if this would do it. If I did a crop. No, no, no. Maybe like a converter, pre-multiply. No. No. I don't know. It used to leave these gaps on the sides. They'd be black because there was nothing there. Alpha. It's really weird. Now it tries to fill that gap by stretching the edge pixels, which is sometimes a desirable thing, sometimes not so desirable. So yeah, that's kind of a interesting little thing they added. But anyway, this footage is moving around. But you'll notice, like if you watch everything in the frame as I slide around, everything's moving a tiny bit. It's kind of like the rotation. Which we can stabilize as well if we wanted to, actually. So we can go back to, let's give this a shot. Let's do, track this thing here. Right? What's that? Yeah, perfect. Track that. Go to the end. Oh, what? Kidding me? Didn't track that? All right, delete that tracker. Let's track that thing. You know what? We should track actually something a little bit further away. Let's track that. That's nice and contrasty. And we'll track it backwards. Come on. What is going on? Right? Prefetch. Everything's in here. Right? These are easy tracks, Blender. Let's do it. Let's do this. Scale it up a bit. How about that? Track that. There we go. That's good. It's not a very good track, huh? Let's try, delete that one. Try another one. But let's set the normalize, and we'll just leave it on that. Let's just try to normalize on. L, how's that look? Good enough for what we're doing. Alright, anyway, I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on that. So let's add that one into the rotation. And now when we go back here, hopefully that rotation, yeah, the rotation's stabilized out as well. So that's really nice. So now we can do work on it, right? So now if you want to put something in the scene, if you want to paint something, if you want to change the color of something, if you want to roto something, you don't have to animate any of that stuff. It'll just stick to it, right? You know, if we want to say we want to change the color of that thing, right? We want to, I'm going to do this all as quick as I can. New mask, call this smoke tower. Let's see. All right. There we go. I'm just gonna get. All right. Anyway, good enough. Let's go back to the view and bring that mask node in, and we can do a color like a RGB. Plug that into there. So now we can, you know, change the color that, oh, right. This is on 50%, so it's scaling it, everything down. So if we turn that up and take a look at it, there we go. So it's changing the color. Take a little green out too. Take a lot of blue out. It's very orange. It's a little sharp. It looks a little fakey. Let's add a blur in, right? This is all just ridiculous. I'm just wasting time I shouldn't be wasting. Anyway. There we go. So that's in there, and you don't have to worry about rotoscoping it. It just stays on. So that's great. We can also do things like, let me move these down. Sebastian would kill me. He knows this thing's on. Let's do, let me bring in a clean plate, right? Still images. Right here is a clean plate where I've taken out, I did a clean plate where I've removed that car, right? So, you know, there's that, and then that car is removed. So I can do, let's go back into masks, and I can create a new one and call it car patch, and draw it right around here. And close that up. And And we can do a mix node, which is under color, mix there. Put that, oh, come on, give me that little thing there. Plug that in. And we just want to, I'm going to duplicate this, which brings me to another cool new feature. You'll notice that when I picked Smoke Tower Roto here, the name of the node updated, which is spectacular. If you've got a really big node tree in here, and you've got, 25 roto nodes, at least now they won't all say mask, so watch when I pick this one, car patch, updates to car patch, which is wonderful. And I'm going to plug that in there, and now we've got everything that we're seeing here. We've got our red tower, we've got this thing, and it's all already tracked in. We don't have to worry about any of that stuff. Looks great. And and how do we get back now our camera motion? That's the new feature I really wanted to show, is this little invert button. Let's duplicate this with Shift D and just drag it right to the end, and you click that invert button, and boom, all your motion is back now, and everything is tracked in right where it's supposed to be. The car patch is there, the tower's red. It makes comping things like this so much easier. You don't have to, I don't have, a track position node and transform nodes all over the place with, wires running everywhere, making things confusing. It just works great. So those are a few of the new features, right? That's all great stuff, all really useful. Red, green, blue channel viewers, node name updates, stabilize, awesome stuff. So now let me show you another one, actually. I'm going to delete most of this stuff here. Let me get rid of most of that, or all of it. And I've already got those tracks, right? So this camera, this footage, if we go back to the motion tracking and zoom in a little bit, you can see there's no, if I play through it, I don't know how smoothly this is going to play on the recording or over the streaming and all that stuff. But there's no motion blur on anything, right? So this was shot with my GoPro, which has a very high shutter speed, or digital shutter, or whatever it is. I don't know what's in there. But anyway, it doesn't capture motion blur at all. So film, however, does. And for things to look natural, it needs to have motion blur. And something we do a lot of the time in VisualFX is we add motion blur to footage. Or if we track in something, if the footage has motion blur and we're just pasting in a still frame, it needs to have motion blur. There's endless instances of needing motion blur. Anything you add into some moving footage is going to need motion blur. So usually that's created with something called optical flow, which analyzes the pixel in every frame and where pixels are going, and creates this motion vector map, and then it kind of knows where it uses those vectors to create accurate motion blur. But what in Blender, there's a way to do it that I actually demonstrated on CG Cookie as a tutorial, where you can track something, attach a plane to it in 3D that's aligned to the camera to look right at the camera, and just make whatever you're trying to add motion blur to, you make that plane bigger than that object. And then you just render that out, and only don't use the render pass, but just use the vector pass. You render it out with the speed vectors, and then you can use that in compositing to add the motion blur. But that goes through 3D, so then you've got to depend on a 3D render every time you're doing it. So as you're moving around in the compositor, nothing updates. Just a little bit of a pain. So Sergey, in his wisdom, has now allowed us to take a track point. I'm going to label these just so I know which is which. Center. We can now take a track point and use it to generate motion vectors. This is the right. And when you do a track, there's nothing in here that you have to do. You just do the track. But now I know which is which. I've got a center one, I've got a right side one. We're going to use the center one. Let's go back into compositing. And all I've got here is my footage. And I'm going to go to a frame where I know it's moving around a lot, right? So if I look around in here, I know right there it's moving a lot, right? Right here it's it's moving pretty fast, right? The camera's moving and everything in the frame is moving towards screen left. So I know it's moving pretty good there. So if we go in here and I bring in a track position node, you'll notice right off the bat that there's the normal X and Y, but now there's a speed option. And that is exactly what it sounds like. So I'm just going to pick my information, camera, and I'm going to pick the center one, like I said I was going to. Leave the position at center, or I'm sorry, absolute. And let's just bring in a vector blur and see how it works. Vector blur. Click that on. I'm going to turn down the samples quite a bit, to maybe like 8, just to speed things up a bit. And I'm going to plug this into the speed. And you want to set your Z to something non-zero. I just type in 0.5. And you will see here's that new progress bar. Vector blur takes its good old sweet time. And we should have motion blur here in a moment. As soon as this does something. There we go. Look at that. Look at that. That's great. Isn't that amazing? Blows my mind. Let me set up a split viewer and you can take a look at that. Let's throw this one in there, this one in there, right? So now we can see them both once this calculates. Again, taking its good old time. Can't see where the split is, but let's do X. Hard to see where it is, huh? Let me do this. Let me turn this off. M. Sorry, I'm using nuke shortcuts here. Color balance. I'm just gonna, not color balance, just RGB curves or something right there, and make this super dark. There we go. So now we know where to look. If I do Y, and I move this up, there we go. So now we can see right where, yes, we're going to split this whole line of cars, right? So now we can see where to look for the motion blur, right? Split this line of cars, right? So there you go. You can see stuff on the bottom, motion blurred, stuff on top. If I turn this up, let's super exaggerate it and go to 3, just for the heck of it. So there, yeah, you can totally see this stuff down here is all getting motion blurred, and the stuff above is not. And that's wonderful. That's amazing. So I wouldn't go more than 1. If you want like a natural motion blur, maybe go a little less. I haven't experimented too much with it yet. It's really new. Like this has literally been just a few days that this has been working properly. So yeah, you may want to experiment with it and all that, but I wouldn't go over 1 unless you want something really exaggerated. And the samples, I would leave it, you know, depending on how fast your camera motion is, you may want to experiment with that. But you can see if at the default of, what was it, 32 or is it 16 or something? I think it was 32. The default's pretty high, so it'll take a little bit to calculate that. Look at that. That looks so wonderful. This is spectacular work. So that's great stuff. So yeah, let's move on to something totally new that I want to show, which is yeah, let me start a new clean Blender. There we go, and I'm going to go right back into motion tracking. So we're all, I for some reason I enjoy loading footage up in here better because you can cache it and set your scene frames and all that kind of stuff, and get all that stuff right out of the way very quickly before going into the compositor. So I'm going to go back to frame sequences. I'm going to grab river lens flare, and let's grab those. And this shot may be familiar if you've ever watched that little on Vimeo. I posted a little sky replacement thing, which is pretty much what we're going to do here, but I want to show off a little node that I created. Which I actually intend to give away at some point on my website. I have a blog I'm going to start at www.openvisualfx.com, and at some point I'll do a nice tutorial with this, explain exactly what it's doing, show a few examples, and then give the node away so people can use it as well, even though it's nothing complex and anybody can kind of set this up if they want. But let's do a track here. We're going to throw a sky in here, so let's do a quick track of that. Boom. That looks great. I'm looking over here, and let's do one over here. That looks great too, right there. Keep your eye on that. Looks spectacular. And again, I'm going to name them right, and the other one is left. And then again, I'm going to, with that left one selected, I'm going to turn on 2D stabilization and add it. And then the right one, I'm going to add in stabilize rotation. And Sergey, if you're listening, another one of those things that was on my little list on the wall at the Blender Institute was stabilize scale. There's an auto scale here, but all that does is scales the image up automatically to compensate for the black edges or the now stretched edges that you're going to get on the gaps around the footage as it slides around to keep it stabilized. That just compensates for that. You can do that in the compositor without this stuff. What would be much nicer here is a stabilized scale. We should have it exactly like this, just down here, scale, be spectacular. Anyway, let's move on. Compositing. I don't know why that's always open, don't like it. Use nodes, set this up, H, get rid of this, bring in a movie clip, close that, waste of power, viewer, H, viewer. We don't really need this. I'm not going to render this thing. So okay, we've got our footage here, and sometimes if you don't want to do the stabilize invert thing, which would work perfectly here, you may want to just bring in a let me grab a sky here. What's a nice one? Let's do this one here. I guess will be fine. If you wanted to place this over, right, and you want it to track to the shot, right, because the shot's moving all around. So now that when you put in the when you put these tracks into the stabilization, that kind of enables these things. It turns these on. So offset XY, scale I don't think is doing anything. You know what? It might be. No, I don't think it is actually. It might be. I'm not 100% sure. Don't believe it is. But that rotation is coming in here, and the offset X and Y are the track positions. So what you can do is bring in this is kind of complex. You want to bring in a transform, set to bilinear. You want to plug this into it. You want to plug in offset XY. You want to plug in the scale, or I'm sorry, the angle. And you want to put these back over top of each other. I'm going to just do it with like a multiply, right? So now you would think like, hey, it's moving with it, but no, look at that. It's like moving opposite, right? Look at, if you watch these clouds and this mountain line, they're kind of moving in opposite directions, right? So what does that mean? That means that we need to invert all this data. So you've got to do this whole thing where you're bringing in converter. You want to bring in a math node, right? I'm going to set it to multiply. I'm going to set it to -1, right? Which will invert it, right? Anything plugged into the top now is going to get multiplied by -1, which is going to invert whatever it is, right? So I'm going to hide that a little bit, drop it in line there, Shift D, right? So now they've all got it. They're all being inverted. So now it moves with it. So that's exactly what we want, right? So that's working wonderful. But it's not positioned correctly, right? So now we've got to do that too. So another thing you want to do is you want to bring in another transform. You want to make sure it's on bilinear again. And now we can use this one to kind of move it, right? So we can scale it up a bit. We can move it up a bit. If I do like 350, that's nice, huh? Maybe 400. Nice. Dramatic. And it should stay still tracked with it, right? So this one is positioning and scaling. This one is taking the track data, inverting it all and applying it, and then multiplying it over. So I've created all this already. It's nothing complex, but this is a pain to set up if you're doing this a lot. So I've created, if I delete all this junk, X, I've created a node that does that. So if I do, let's see, where is my node groups? Oh, where are they? They used to be in here. Oh well. Where would I put those? Blender projects. Oh man, node groups. Whew. There it is. Node tree. So these are all the groups that I use a lot. I've got 2D parent, black levels, chromatic aberration. These two are, I did a presentation on these two at the LA Blenders group. And that's another big tutorial for my blog when I have that. That's a great little tool. Light wrap, all this stuff, a bunch of different clamps, high pass, pixelating, film grain. But I'm going to grab this one called 2D Parent. Import that. All right. So now we can bring it in from the group node or the group section, 2D Parent. So there it is. All the same exact stuff. So you plug in, even though it's asking for the background image in this case is only for setting a canvas, basically, because Blender does not have a canvas size, a defined canvas size. So if you bring in something smaller, if you bring in something weird, I don't know. This node isn't going to work all the time, like if you were to bring in something small, because of the whole canvas issue. But there is a way to make this node. If you open it up, it's all the same stuff I just showed you how to make that we were doing. There is a way, I think, to set this up where I can pass the alpha through and still get it to come out with the correct alpha. But I haven't set that up yet because I haven't needed it as much. But until the canvas is really fixed, that kind of stuff won't work perfectly. But for this case, it certainly will. So in this case, right, we're going to use this. This is going to kind of set a canvas size. We're going to plug our normal foreground image that we want to use into that. Then we set our X, Ys right in where they need to go. Plug in the angle. And now it's exactly the same. So now we've got, we can plug this back into here. Still got our images in there. We can use this to kind of scale it up exactly how we want. We can use, this to scale it, this to position it where we want. Let's go even higher. It looks nice, huh? Looks good, except for all this black junk, right? But we can quickly, you know, and you can even rotate it too if you want, like 0.05. Let's do like 0.03. Not bad. And what if we wanted to actually composite this in, right? So let's, I'll walk you through this just because we're here. Let's do a converter. I'm going to grab separate, plug the image into here so we can look at those channels, right? If we look at this and we look at which one's the most contrasty, it looks like the blue one is, right? The blue channel's got the most darks down here and brights up here. So we're going to use that right there. Not the alpha, that one. And I'm going to bring in a color ramp, which is essentially acting as a kind of a levels node for us. We're going to crush this. We're basically just going to make a matte for ourselves, like that. And we want this to be, we want the sky to be completely white, while the bottom is completely black. And if we look at this now, and we plug that into the factor, puts our sky right where we need it to be. But you can see it looks horrendous. Let's go ahead and get these out of the way a little bit. And we're going to drop in a, I'm just going to goof around here. I haven't really thought this out very much, but if we make this a little more yellow, right, get in the ballpark, a little more red, start getting it in the ballpark a bit. It's getting there. So that's good. That's, you know, it's not perfect, but better, looking slightly better, right? A little more red, a little more yellow. Yeah, so that's all right. We may even want to blur. I'm going to turn that down. Again, I'm just kind of goofing off here. Filter, blur. We may want to blur that a little bit, like 2. No, maybe more. You know what we may want to do, because what I'm doing is I'm looking right here. This is kind of mess, and there's sort of this little glowy edge down here. So maybe we do this kind of thing. That's not sure. And you know what else we can do is kind of we can create a blur matte if we want. That might help. That we can put after the merged image. If we take a look at our matte that we have here, we could, what do we want? We want the filter. We want to plug this, our matte, into that. Take a look at that. Switch it to Sobel. We get an edge, and we can then add in a blur down here. Oh, that's what I wanted. Filter, blur, right there. And we want to use that as the matte for it. And you want to turn on variable size when you're doing that. And then we might be able to blur this a little bit, right? To get that edge blurred a bit. I don't know if is it working? There we go. Yeah, you can see it kind of working. But that's a little too high, so we just keep it at like 3 maybe. Looks not bad. So anyway, you get the idea. You can also dial down if you don't want the sky coming in that much. These clouds are looking really funky. But you can throw on, because we're kind of now using this matte to regulate where it is, we can throw in a math node set to multiply. So now that will kind of dial it in. 1 is default, and as you turn it down, it kind of dials it back a bit. So, and of course that should stay tracked in with all the footage, which it does. It looks great. So yeah, so that's the kind of stuff I wanted to show today. Oh man, look at that disaster. Anyway, yeah, this is one of my biggest things I talk about a lot when I discuss keying is that you always need to do separate keys. This is a rec down here, right? This is a rec. Yeah, all this stuff is a rec. These are a rec. I would multiply these back over and make them dark again. This all looks spectacular. This looks great. All this stuff looks wonderful. But once we get down here, it starts turning into a wreck. So I would do garbage rotos and do different keys and stuff like that and bring edges back and all that kind of stuff. But it's a little out of the realm of what I wanted to show here and today. Another thing I think I can show you, there's a little bug in it, but I thought I'd show it anyway. We're all Blender users. We know we deal with bugs once in a while. Let me go ahead and let me duplicate this just to bring it up here, just so I kind of have a clean node flow here. So there's a issue with the blur. There used to be an issue anyway. Let me grab another image. I'm going to grab a Blender cookie thing because this is very good at demonstrating this issue. So this is their logo. What's his name? Baker. That's right. His name is Baker, and we are going to throw him right over this footage with an alpha over. Throw him on. There he is. What? Why has he got a white background? He's got no white background, right? He's got an alpha. Convert to pre-multiply. There you go. So we're good there. You can also turn this off, and if you really wanted to, you could throw in an actual node to do the same exact thing. So when we used to blur, you know, if you would drop a blur on this, oh, come on, middle mouse, let's go. What are we doing? There we go. Filter, blur, and it's not going to do it anymore because it's broken. But say I blurred this like 100 by 100. What it used to do, see how it's clipping? It used to clip, well, right now it's broken, but it used to clip. It would blur everything that was inside of this image, but it would clip it at the edges of that image, when really it should have been blurring this as if it was, you know, the full size. And this is a bug. I sent this to Sergey today, this morning. So this is going to get fixed, but normally this shouldn't work. But he's added this wonderful extend bounds. This is absolutely going to be one of the most useful fixes to the compositor, at least for me, in probably 2 or 3 years. This is the greatest. You click that, and now it just blurs it properly. It just blurs it properly. It doesn't clip it. It doesn't matter how big this image is now, or how big you blur it. It will just blur it properly. This is a miracle. This is this just blew my mind. We were talking about this at the Blender conference, and I was talking about that I wanted that it was unacceptable. There was no way to blur. If you put a smaller image over a bigger image, there was no way to blur it properly. You had to do things like this. You had to do things like this, where the image has a huge area around it, so that you could blur it and it could extend into that area. So I was asking him to create I was calling it an extend edges, like or grow bounds kind of thing, where you would plug in a node after here and tell it, plug in like 200x, 200y, and it would extend this little canvas 200 pixels each way in X and 200 each way in Y. Then you could do a blur. And if you needed to blur 500, you just turn this up to 500 and it would just constantly be working. But he said, well, wouldn't it just be easier to put that all in the same node and just have it a click? And I was like, heck yeah, do it. So he did it. So yeah, that's another one of those glorious Sergey fixes. So yeah, anyway, so now blur works great now. Never have to worry about that again. Of course, when Blender does get revamped, when the whole compositor gets kind of rewritten from the ground up, and we can cache things and have RAM, and it's faster, and it has a set canvas for working in, none of this kind of thing will matter. But for now, it's spectacular. So yeah, the compositor's gotten a lot better. A lot of these little necessary fixes. And watch my blog at www.openvisualfx.com, and hopefully soon I'll be launching it. Right now there's not even a blog up. You can go sign up though. There's an email at that site if you want to sign up. And one of the early tutorials I'll do will be on this parent node. I may revamp it a little bit so that it takes alphas into consideration, because if you do something like this, let's see, if we take a look at this, say for example we plug this into, I know I should just be done, I should stop, but I'm going to do a little more. Let me turn that off too. All right, so if we got this guy in here, and I want to bring him down to like 100, there he is back there behind the mountain lurking. Yeah, we can even use this, make it look even better. There he is. Why is it so dark? Oh, because I got him on multiply. Let's just do mix. Why is that background so dark? That's interesting. What was I doing with the background that made it so dark? Oh, it's all black. Duh. Maybe I need to copy one of these up here, huh? Duplicate. That work? No, nothing. No alpha. See, that alpha's not coming through. That's what's happening. So what I've got to do is go in here. This is exactly what I wanted to illustrate for you, is that when you use something smaller, the alpha doesn't come through. But I think there's a way that I can take the alpha from the foreground image, somehow apply all this same crap to it and pipe it, replace it, so that we can then put that over this properly without having a full thing here. So anyway, and that should still be tracked in too. Look at that. Awesome. Anyway, those are the things I wanted to show. I wanted to go over all those new compositor things. I wanted to show off this little 2D parent node, because I don't believe that I showed that at the Blender conference this year. I can't remember if I did or not. I showed quite a few little nodes that I had made, but I don't think this was one of them. So I wanted to show that off a little bit, and that's all I got. So I don't know how long this went. 38 minutes, 40 minutes. I hope that's good. I hope that's not too long. That's probably going to throw everybody into jeopardy because it's not 30 minutes or 1 hour. But anyway, hope you enjoyed it, and feel free to check out my blog and shoot me emails, whatever, Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff. You can find me around. I'm very easy. And yeah, I'll be watching it for everybody else's presentations. So thanks for having me. Glad to be part of this. See ya.